So here we are at a granite outcropping, bedrock outcropping. Dodge Ridge Road is 100 yards on my left, Camp Oski is 200 yards on my right. Why we're stopping here is to help you understand land use. So if you think you're the first person to have camped at the Lair, you'd be wrong. Humans have been using the Lair and the associated area for thousands of years. This is an example of what we mean by that. These are cupules that were used as bedrock mortars by the Native Americans, where they would grind materials for use, either food, medicinal purposes, paint, you name it. And they would use a handstone and put the materials into a low spot in the rock and grind and grind and grind and grind. And over thousands of years, they developed these holes in the bedrock, in granite, that are several inches deep in this case, and then several inches across in this case. This bedrock outcropping here, I counted 21 of these cupules on this bedrock outcrop and a boulder down the hill here. I think there's 21 if I recall. There are also cupules in gold at the stage. There's a bedrock boulder that's sitting out on the south end of the stage outside the bleachers there that has cupules on it. So my point here is that there is evidence of both Native American use and use by folks post-settlement after the 1850s all throughout camp. You just have to have an eye to see it, and today we'll show you some of those things. We are right behind Gold Stage. I mentioned earlier that there were cupules here, and there's these three examples of cupules right here behind Gold. It's very likely that this area was pretty readily used and year after year after year by Native Americans. It has all the features that give us a clue as to why they'd be here. Number one, it's a pretty darn nice spot, as we all know. Number two, it's at an ecotype change between a meadow and a forest, and Native Americans habitually use areas on the edges of those ecotype changes. So we pretty much have everything here. There's water here, there's resources here, there's a really nice spot to be here. So it's no wonder that they were here before us for a good long while. So this is just another example here in camp. There are others. I'll let you find them when you return next summer, and maybe you can reach out to me and tell me about them. So we are now in Camp Blue. That's the North Fork of the Tuolumne River behind me. This location isn't readily apparent when you stand here and you look at it, but when you put it all together, you realize that this is where a crossing occurred by railroad back in the golden days of railroad logging. So Camp Blue is the terminus of what once was a logging railroad system, and the camp there was a logging camp before it became Camp Blue. So we're going to show you excerpts of that as we go back into Camp Blue, but I wanted to point out a couple things. The railroad grade is visible on the other side of the river. You need to go over there and find it. But what the old-time loggers and railroaders did is they used this boulder as a mid-span support for their trestle coming across the river. If my cameraman Bia would turn around and find that 12 by 12 there with the iron sticking out of it, that is the western end of the trestle that's still here. So they put it together. The railroad grade is about my height going towards Camp Blue and going across the river, and on grade and turning and going southwest. And they use this boulder as an abutment for the trestle to cross the river. So now we're going to walk the railroad grade back into Blue. One of the hallmarks of railroad grades is they tend to be on gentle grade, usually 3% or less. The reason for that is the weight of the trains and their ability to climb was pretty limited. So railroad grades are usually very gentle and on the contour with wide sweeping turns so that accommodate that long train going through a turn. This through cut right here is literally a through cut in the hillside where they maintain grade. They couldn't put it on the outer edge because that would have created too tight of a turn from coming across the trestle. So they had to come through the hill and excavate it all out, shove all the side cast over towards my left, and stay on grade with that gradual turn that eventually pops out in Camp Blue right at the kitchen. For those of you familiar with Blue, if you're looking at the staff area, which is down the hill, and you see this through cut, that's where we're standing. So we're now at the terminus of the through cut and breaking into Camp Blue itself. And what's nice about Camp Blue and why they made it the end is because it's kind of a flat spot on the hillside. So the railroad is coming out of what were steep slopes behind it and coming into a gentle area. What they did at this gentle area is they put a railroad siding up to the right. They put one in the middle, which is right through your tennis courts and ends up at the lodge. And then they had a lower one that actually goes all the way out and terminates right near your stage at Blue. The upper grade terminates at the last cabin, tent cabin, on what is the southwest side of Camp Blue, and that's where the terminus finally ends. The railroad grade finally ends there. So almost all of Camp Blue, and I suspect the kitchen is probably exactly where the kitchen was in the logging days. So they brought it in and they fan out these grades on the level so that they could have multiple rail settings all next to each other, so as to put people's houses there, cooking facilities there, and then places to load logs and haul them back out to the sawmill. Blue, as I mentioned earlier, was originally a railroad logging camp, and we are at the terminus now of what was the middle rail within Camp Blue itself. So there was a lower rail, a middle rail, and an upper rail. They're called sidings because they were sided next to each other. Anyhow, this is the terminus of what was the railroad line back somewhere between 1910 and 1940 is when they were using railroad logging in Tuolumne County. So actually the 1800s through about 1940. So I would imagine that this camp probably was used in the 20s or thereabouts. If you're interested in learning more, there's a couple of books on the railroads in Tuolumne County. One is called Sugar Pine Railroad, and the other, I think, is the history of railroads in Tuolumne County. You can get those at the ranger station here at Pinecrest Summit Ranger Station or down at the Miwok Ranger Station.